Welcome agents. Today I've got a couple of things to discuss in this video taken from a recent stream with Hamish Bode and Chris, and this will include stash base, play of the week in respect to PvP and builds, and some other little bits and bobs. So if you enjoy this, please drop a like down below, subscribe for dedicated Division content, and let's just get straight into this. First and foremost, the Shepherd system is bad. And even the devs acknowledge this. On stream, the devs address the issue of endorsing players and how the system is not something you'd grind because it would just become boring. Instead, it's more of like they need some help whilst I'm doing this activity, I'll go over there and help them. But as we all know, the endorsing thing doesn't really work. Now, what was very surprising to me is that there are no rewards for the Shepherd system right now. When they announced this new system, they did say rewards will be coming, but Titan Update 5 was released on the 23rd of July for Year 1 Pass owners, and that was nearly 4 weeks ago. So to not have any rewards at this point is kind of a little bit crazy, to be honest. Now, especially when you consider the point of the Shepherd system is to help others and be endorsed, progressing your Shepherd rank. It doesn't make much sense to help others with this system if you're not getting any sort of reward for those players. That was the reason why the Shepherd system was put in there in the first place, so that you could be rewarded for actually progressing through this Shepherd rank. Otherwise, we could just have the same old call for backup as how it used to be. Now, I have talked about the issues with the Shepherd system before, and I've said that I think the best way to fix this the main reason why it's a major problem, that being that players don't really know how to endorse or decides not to endorse other players. The best way is to automatically endorse players. And I could have told you before this came out that allowing players to endorse others was never going to work. And it does appear that the devs have acknowledged this. They're aware that they believe the Shepherd system was a good idea, and I have to agree, it was a good idea, but like with a lot of the things, it's just been implemented too soon, without any real consideration for the impact on other people and how it might or might not work. My understanding of all this sort of stuff is if you give, and this is going to sound bad, but if you give players the option to help others, they won't. And in this instance where you have to manually endorse someone and it's not clear on actually how you do it, that was never going to work. So hopefully with TU6 they may, or even before, hopefully they may actually consider changing this system to a more automatic process. And if that's the case, then I'll probably end up going through the Shepherd system myself, especially if they tie rewards to it. Because at the moment there are no rewards, so what's the incentive? Moving on to the big one that still comes up a lot in my comments and on streams and whatever, and that's stash base. So the question of stash base was brought up and the devs addressed this on stream. They basically said that there's nothing stopping them from adding 1,500 extra spaces, but that's just putting a band-aid over a larger problem. And I'm going to have to agree, to be honest. The main issue right now is the game drops a lot of gear, a lot of bad gear, and the systems in place, like the recal station for example, encourage players to hoard gear, meaning even if they were to increase it to a 1,000 slots in your stash, it would likely still become full at some point because the overriding issue hasn't been fixed. Now, Hamish did say, wouldn't you rather have less gear drop but it be much better? Absolutely, that is exactly what I'd want. And that goes back to the early days of the Division, and that happened when it first came out. You wouldn't get a lot of gear drop, but when it did drop, normally it would be very good. And actually, you got that feeling of, I got that piece of gear. It's probably going to be good. It's probably going to help me. Whereas right now, and even towards, I think it was middle of Division, where they decided to increase all the drops, and I wish they would go back to the system. I never liked the idea of an abundance of loot dropping everywhere. So if this is something the devs are considering, i.e. reducing the overall loot drop chance across the board, but ensuring each drop is actually a good one and a useful one, then I will be very happy. And if they did that, then the whole thing about the stash base being too low would become redundant, in a sense that at that point you would have more than enough stash base. Absolutely. You look at someone like Destiny, certainly for me, I've never filled up my vault, and that's because most of the time you can even deconstruct all your gear, but you don't get an abundance of loot like you do really in the Division. What do you guys think about that? Do you like the idea of going back to how it was originally on day one of Division, where you had, the loot drop chance was low, but when it did drop, it was something that you knew for sure was going to be something useful for your build, and you got that sense of, of that drop. At the moment when gear drops, it's just kind of like, you know, gear drops, whatever. I want to go back to the system where something drops, you know, an exotic or a high end, you're like, what is it? I can't wait to see what it is. That's what I miss. So that should ultimately fix the stash space issue, and the same could be for mods. You know, I've said before that with mods, they need to change it so that mods become like weapon mods. You know, they become unlockable for the future, and they don't add to the stash. So that should fix it all. Anyway, I want you guys to let me know what you think. The devs did go on to talk about there being, you know, too many different types of gear, meaning you need a spreadsheet to follow everything, which is very, very true. If you go onto Reddit or whatever, you'll see spreadsheets of all the stuff, and the only real way of following what you need to get, or what the highest, you know, amount of stuff is, or whatever it might be, you need to follow a spreadsheet, and that doesn't really make sense. You know, it doesn't encourage people to play or stay in the game if they're having to go onto, you know, third-party websites to find the information to play the game. That's a little bit long-winded. I'm just glad the devs acknowledge this. And I hope that they reduce the amount of variations with each brand set as a very minimum, because that's needed massively. So moving on, and Cassie Mendoza, the gunrunner. So if you've gone to Cassie Mendoza since Title Update 5, you would have noticed that she's not actually selling exotic weapons, which is exactly what she was meant to do with the update, if you didn't know that. Now the devs confirm this is something they're looking into. Apparently it's not intentional, so hopefully this will happen soon, and I really hope so, because I've actually not gone to Cassie Mendoza forever, because simply doesn't sell anything worth your time. I always watch people's videos on about what she's selling just in case, but generally it's always really bad. But if she started selling exotics, which is exactly what they said was coming, you know, with Title Update 5, then I will certainly go and check her out more often. The devs went on to confirm that the alarm in the base of operations will be turned off in Title Update 6. Finally, really good news. They went on to confirm that starting in a couple of weeks on State of the Game, they will no longer be showing the sort of cosplay and community stuff at the end, but instead having sort of PvP plays of the week and builds of the week, which I think is actually a really cool idea. My suggestion, just to encourage players even more, would be to tie some sort of in-game rewards to the winner each week. So maybe, you know, if you get the Player of the Week, then maybe you get some materials and caches and that sort of thing. You know, props to Marco Blades, who actually told me about this change coming on Twitter. So, you know, all credit to him goes for this. And this will actually be useful with TU6, because I imagine with TU6, you know, we know they're looking at loot, we know they're looking at PvP, RNG, inventory, and all that sort of stuff. So I would assume that with TU6, if they do it properly, having something like having a cache and some materials will actually be a good incentive, because the likelihood is this stuff is going to, certainly the cache is going to drop gear that will actually become useful in TU6 anyway. Next up, the devs talked about the audio issues. This is something I experienced, as does to everyone. They confirm a maintenance will be coming soon, which will fix some of the issues of the audio. They didn't confirm what audio issues, you know, were going to be fixed. And this will, of course, be an ongoing topic, because it's going to keep getting upset and whatever. But hopefully, it's going to address the major ones. So we'll have to wait and see about that. Last but not least, and I see a lot of people ask this, but in the apparel section, on the bottom right hand corner, there's a box with a lock on it. It's a red box with a lock on it. Well, here's Chris explaining what this is.
On one of the PTSs. So I'm just going to say it because it's out there anyway. It's for poses. They will be introduced at some point or not, depending on how happy we were with the quality. They were initially, I think, on the TU4 PTS. So yeah, I'm not saying any more of that, but like, yes, that's something that is coming in the future.
So as you heard, this is poses, and it may or may not make it into the game at some point in the future. On screen are 2 screenshots uploaded to Reddit showing these poses. And again, we'll have to see whether these actually make it into the game or not. From the sounds of what Chris said, it will depend on the success of the game as to whether these actually make it or not. Not totally sure, but I assume if they're already in the files, that they're going to be added eventually. So we'll have to see whether we get any cool poses in the future. So there you go, guys. Not a whole lot of news here today, unfortunately, but there isn't a whole lot going on at the moment. Now, I will have another couple of videos coming this week. The first one looking at PvP, conflict, you know, Dark Zone, all of that sort of stuff in respect to the Mega Thread that was recently put on the Reddit forum. There's also a new one on there about inventory as well, which I do need to tackle, and again, some I'm working on currently. So these are videos that are going to be coming out shortly, and I'll be uploaded probably to the channel this week, so stay tuned for that. And of course, if we do get any further info or news or whatever it might be, then of course I will cover it here first. Thanks very much for all your support, guys. Thanks very much if you did watch until the end, and until the next one, epic out.